So I did something radical the other week. I went to Italy.
Sound.
And I know what you may be thinking. Harry, you went on holiday. You can't seriously be making a segment out of this. Well, you know what they say? If you're good at something, like taking holidays, never do it for free. And so I'm actually monetizing this by putting it into this segment.
Did you pay your respects to the family?
There were plenty of families there, and I was very respectful towards all of them. Because, of course, being an Anglo tourist, I need to understand that Europeans have a particular idea of Anglo tourism that I need to dissuade them from, because I am not going to be a fat football yobbo.
Why?
Wandering out, because that's not my style.
I've got a lot of respect for fat football yobbos.
I mean, all do well.
All they want is egg and chips, man. There's nothing wrong with that.
Fair play. To be fair, I understand that part of it. I just don't want to go around behaving disrespectfully in wonderful and lovely historic places.
Hey, this is an Axis country, man.
It's still a wonderful historic country with lots of history. It's also the seat of the Roman Empire.
Yes, indeed.
Also, I have to tell you though, because in several Greek islands, there are some people who come in, they absolutely get smashed, absolutely wasted.
It's one good thing that Brits are excellent.
And you know, the fun thing is, because a lot of the time, when people meet me and I meet people on the street and they tell me, you know, I've been to Greece, I ask them, did you go to Laganas? And they say, yeah, it's basically the island of debauchery there, the place in Zante. The whole island is good, but there are some pockets of debauchery there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fair play. You wouldn't add to that debauchery yourself, would you?
Of course not.
Of course not. Stelios is a well-to-do, down-to-earth sort of gentleman.
Okay, yeah.
All right, it looks like we might need to restart the video wall because Stelios has been eaten by the void.
Yes.
I'm resisting the abyss.
Oh, there we go.
Here it is.
Stelios has warded off the evil spirits that were... All right, we'll handle it once I'm done talking about it. So while I was there, I took a day trip to a beautiful, beautiful city called Verona. If you're a fan of the works of Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, this is the city that it's set in, that inspired Shakespeare. You can go and you can visit the famous balcony, which I did. That part's a massive tourist trap, but people are still fairly respectful to one another. But you can see from these photos, which aren't my photos, my fiancée took these photos. She's very good. She's much better than I am at this sort of stuff. You can see it's lovely, it's clean, it's well ordered. And I took a few notes on it, and I talked about how, you know, they've got wonderful architecture. They've got a definite respect for the heritage that that's been passed on to them. It's not all surrounded by hideous glass monuments to modernism that take away from that local feel. I only spotted, this is true, 2 homeless people, right? And if you are familiar with British cities any time in the last 25 years, is that every street corner has homeless people down it. Every unused doorway will have a homeless person sleeping in it. So when you moved to England, was this something that you noticed, or have you got anything similar?
Noticed, but I've heard by social workers and also people who work in NGOs dealing with poverty that this has to do much more with drugs than with social provision.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
That they do have places to sleep, and they do have food, but a lot of them in search of drugs,
because they don't want to.
Those they sleep outside.
They're not allowed to do drugs in these places where they can sleep, so they'll just stay outside.
Yeah, but take that with a pinch of salt.
No, that actually does
lifestyle thing.
That does work with my experiences living in Manchester for a while, where some of my friends who I was going to university with in Manchester were from London, and they said, I thought it was bad in London, but coming to Manchester, it was a whole different level of homelessness, because you would walk down the street, disused phone boxes, street corners, doorways, and there would always be a homeless person smoking crack. You can walk through Manchester and have to sort of barge past smack addicts who are completely skinny, pale, emaciated, no future going on there, nothing happening except the desire to do more drugs. So I can completely understand where you're coming from. But here, for whatever reason, whether it be due to social factors or a lack of drug addicts in the local area, I didn't see anything like that. If this was Manchester, there'd be homeless people here, homeless people here, homeless people up here probably as well. And that was something that I noticed, that it was clean and orderly. And Josh recently came back from holiday to the Netherlands. He noticed the same thing while he was there. It was clean, it was orderly, very few homeless people, if at all. I also noticed that compared to some cities, and I've been told that this is quite different depending on which Italian city you're in. So, for instance, if you're in Milan or some of the other cities, certainly further down south, you can get a lot of sand people, shall we say, milling about. But this was mostly a mix of Italians and Europeans, and of the foreigners who were there, the non-European populations, they were very well behaved, and if they were of foreign origin and living there, they seemed to be much better integrated than you get over here, because you get these big ethnic enclaves. Now, I will say again, it's probably different in a lot of Italian cities, but in Verona in particular, it wasn't like that. And I was thinking about just the pure contrast, as I've already been highlighting, with British cities was completely stark to me. Going from that to coming back to Britain to see that we have completely demolished our own heritage and culture for the benefit of what? So we can have streets flooded with foreigners who hate our culture, who don't want to assimilate or integrate or adhere to our own rules, and so that we can have it flooded with homeless people as well. People who are completely destroying their lives with no support networks that are kind of pushing them properly into making those decisions to better themselves. And we've written about this a lot. Carl's written about what he calls the decline. Here's a perfect image right here. And it is always sad to see, but as well in Manchester, you get people who litter the streets, who look homeless, who aren't actually as well. They're just trying to avoid having to work, so they'll sit around and collect people's money. I've seen it, friends of mine have seen it, where they'll have these big bags where they've got loads and loads and loads of cash, and they'll have the one bag with a few bits of change here and there, and they'll take it whenever they get a decent enough amount of money and put it through there so they look poorer than they actually are. Very, very bad, the kind of thing that goes on. We've done segments as well where you can talk about visiting the ruins. Just this guy, bald and bankrupt, who goes around all sorts of countries, even in the east of Europe, and then he just comes back to Britain and goes, come on, former Soviet bloc countries keep their cities in better nick than we do, and the towns as well.
One thing, though, to say is that in a lot of countries in Europe, it is unlikely to see homeless people and stuff near some sites, especially very touristic sites. But if you go further, you will see you will see them.
Oh, I'm sure.
And sometimes you will see much worse than you see here in England.
Absolutely. But even in England, when we do have larger cultural heritage sites, say, you still see them. You still see. We don't even really have the kind of prudence to say, hey, the cultural heritage, maybe we should keep that neat and tidy. We're completely letting it go to the dogs. And this is something I learned about earlier as well. I'd not seen this figure before, and I didn't include it in this, but I did see somebody talking about how through the 1950s, about 1/3 of our country manors in the States were demolished. It was about 1 every 5 days, because for some reason following the Second World War, a large part of the British elite just decided we don't want heritage anymore. We couldn't
afford the upkeep.
Well, we could afford plenty.
I have to defend England here about something, because it's the same thing that happened to Greece, because a lot of the time the architecture is being compared. And it's just a fact that some cities were bombed during World War II and some others weren't. So...
Well, no, but again, we've had plenty of cities that were bombed during World War II, that parts of it have been rebuilt, and we couldn't keep the upkeep of these country estates, but we could implement in the latter half of the 40s, massive socialistic changes and implement a new welfare state under the Attlee government, and we could rebuild parts of the cities, but for some reason we chose to rebuild them with horrible utilitarian brutalist architecture. We chose to knock down lots of buildings that weren't bombed and replace them with horrible, soul-crushing brutalist buildings.
I will give you this, because there are some buildings that are just so horrible, you can't just explain that with monetary issues. Just absolutely horrible.
Well, of course. See, because in where I'm from, in Crewe, I've got old picture books of what the town used to look like before the war and after the war. And it's true that we were a target of German bombing because we were a major railway site. So we had lots of transport and we had lots of resources coming through the town. So they were targeting it, and a lot of it did get bombed out. But still, immediately following the war, it's not like the whole town was leveled. A lot of the town, including some of the old cultural heritage buildings that had been there for 100 years since the Victorian era, were still there. And then we knocked them down anyway and replaced them with horrible concrete blocks.
There's an element of cultural pride. I go to Italy quite a lot. I love Italy. And you often see these viral videos online of Americans going to Italy and like cutting spaghetti with scissors or asking for a cappuccino in the afternoon and making a joke of how upset the Italians get over these small things. And people are like, why do they care? But if you want to drink a latte in the morning, cappuccino in the afternoon, why does it matter? If you want to have ketchup on your pizza or eat your spaghetti with scissors, why does it matter? And it matters because it's cultural pride. It's having standards. It's caring about the small things because they are what make you a culture. And we don't have much of that left. We don't have much cultural pride because people say we don't have a culture anymore.
But I do have to say about the Italian kitchen, and here is where I may, some of our Italian friends may be saddened. I do think thick crust pizza is much better than thin crust pizza.
I have to agree with you there.
It's a very different meal. It's a very different meal. I do love the Chicago town deep dish pizza, but it's very different to an Italian.
Yeah, but I mean, you just have the small piece of pizza and it just evaporates.
But the Italian pizza is still quite healthy, relatively speaking, compared to these great big...
Yeah, but when I eat pizza, I don't want to eat health.
Italian food is just great. It really is. It's just natural. Even their bread, compared to like English or American bread full of sugar and bleach and stuff... Like, they just live on the essentials of.
I don't know
olive
if it's
oil.
exactly full of bleach. Just so we don't get noted.
American bread is full of bleach. I don't know about English.
I don't know about English bread.
English bread is just full of sugar, but the Italians just eat the basic staples, and it's great, and they don't get fat from it.
I didn't really partake much in the food culture. I've got to be perfectly honest. I am the pickiest eater you've ever met.
They have the best gelato.
I'm the opposite. Oh, their gelato is wonderful.
I did have lots
Frutti
of ice
di
cream.
Bosco is my favorite. And Nocciola, my favorite.
In regards to the poverty thing, though, the thing that Europe has that we didn't have for a long time is these organized Romanian crimes, crime gangs. We have them now in England, where I used to see them in France like 10 years ago, where you get on the tube, they walk around, plant their tissues next to you with a little note saying, I'm poor or something, please give me money. Yeah. And they come back and collect your money. And pretty much all over Italy and France, you've got these Romanian gangs everywhere. And so we've imported that from Europe. So it's not always that Europe is better.
Oh no, I don't want to say that Europe is better at absolutely everything. What I want to highlight here is that there is been a noticeable and visible decline that you can always see when you've gone from a city in Europe that, like the ones that I visited, because I went to Verona, I went to Venice, which is a bit too touristy for me. I would have liked it to have been a bit quieter, but I mean, it's always been a merchant city, so I don't know if it would have ever been a quiet city in its history. But there's a respect for the culture and a knowledge of their own heritage, which is being whipped out of us here, that's being demolished in front of our very eyes. And I noticed around the same time that other people were starting to talk about this. Posts like from this person, Miss Joe, who'd gone to London, Helsinki, and Tallinn, and noticed that in those foreign cities, they felt more safe. There was a cultural diversity there. There weren't these enormous ethnic enclaves of where you'll get an entire block of a city that's made up of foreigners who don't integrate with anything else, and the space was clean. And then you go to somewhere like London, and in large parts of London, obviously there are parts of London which are still nice, but large parts of London do, as she says here, feel like it's crumbling.
Oh yeah.
Tallinn, by the way, in Estonia is absolutely fantastic. But you also have to factor in that it's just tiny in comparison to London. It's just, a 30th or something.
But of course, the points that we're making here are essentially that the UK did not have to choose this path. The UK could be managed and governed better by real statesmen who want the country to be somewhere worth living in. Yeah. We don't get that right now, so you get somewhere like this, which seems to have a mix of the old and the new, but in a way that's clean, it's orderly, it's safe to be in. In Britain, we get this. This, as I've pointed out before, this is just the cultural high watermark of 14 years of Tory Britain and 25 plus years of Blairism, which is that you get these probable criminal fronts in every high street, surrounded by empty storefronts. This has been pointed out by other people as well. Here's the aesthetic of Britain now.
All the shops on Oxford Street, those American candy stores, they're all fronts.
Yes, it's very clear.
Turkish barbers everywhere, all fronts.
Yeah, just massive queues for basic services that you wouldn't have got before. This was for that dentist in Bristol that opened, and you got an enormous queue of people because our infrastructure can't manage it anymore. And then you get stuff like this, which was trying to board a bus in London in 2024.
Mr. Sadiq Khan, see the situation.
Is there a London in Pakistan or Bangladesh? What?
Well, it certainly doesn't look like a London that most people would recognise, does it? I thought the British were great at queuing. The new British should be just as good at queuing, right? That's what our entire culture, the civic culture, is based around.
I don't see much civic culture or much Britain there.
No, neither do I. This is what you've got to put up with when you import half of the third world, is that you begin to resemble more of the third world.
Are you saying import the third world, become the third world?
Yes,
Oh.
yes, I am. And that's not the country that I want to live in.
Notice what is going on.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then other people have been, again, pointing this out. It's the shock when you get to the airport. And this is an experience that mimicked mine exactly, because I got back to Manchester Airport a few weeks ago after I'd been on holiday. And the contrast was so shocking because going through, it was Venice Airport. And you'd expect it to be something that's very busy, very difficult to get through. And it was busy, but again, even the airport was clean. Everybody was doing their jobs right. It was actually quite quick to get through. I was shocked about how easy it was to get through and navigate through the place. And then you get back to Britain and you get this. This is the experience. You get home and it doesn't feel like home. It feels like a place that's kind of rubbing in your face that you don't belong here anymore. So that was my experience. And it's the culture shock of getting back to my own nation that I'm supposed to have heritage and pride in, and just seeing that there is no respect for any of that. No culture, no history that I can tether myself to until I get out of some of the bigger cities, get out of the airport, and then I can get back to a part of it that feels a bit more like home.
Mos Eisley Cantina. I just arrived in London yesterday from back in the UK from somewhere, and I can mirror this experience entirely. You know, you hear people over the tannoys saying, next train to Paddington. You're like, I can't understand what you're saying. Just have a received pronunciation accent on the tannoys in the United Kingdom, in our main airports, for goodness sake. Just
and again,
make it easy for people.
I want to be clear. There are still nice cities in Britain. You can go to places like Bath. You can go to places like Oxford, and they are still nice and hold some of that heritage. But even then, because they're student cities, most of the time you'll just find that you're just surrounded by Chinese
people.
Yeah. So even then, although to be fair, I'm sure the Italians are complaining, all our nice cities full of English people. So, but there you go. That's all I've got to say on the matter.
Hi folks, thanks for watching. This is a clip from a broader podcast called the Podcast of the Lotus Eaters. It's live 1 p.m. every day UK time, Monday to Friday. And if you want to support us, you can sign up for £5 a month, help us keep the lights on, because of course we're demonetized here, and go and watch Lads Hour. Lads Hour is one of my favourite shows because it's basically, and I guess there's no easy way to describe it, than calling it The View, but for men. We talk about whatever we want, but from an unabashedly masculine perspective, and we have a great time doing it. So come over and watch that.